Americans love acts of defiance, especially when it looks like we're on the ropes and our back's against the wall. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to talk about a real fighting ship that was crewed by some real fighting men. This ship saved countless American lives and helped bring an empire of truly evil men to its knees. Ladies and gentlemen, the Battleship, BB-36, USS Nevada. Stick around. In 1906, the English changed naval warfare forever when they launched what was the first truly modern battleship, HMS Dreadnought. Dreadnought basically means fears nothing. And that's certainly something you could say about this revolutionary warship. Why was she so revolutionary? Well, here's a few reasons. She was the first all big gun battleship. Armed with 12-inch guns, she had heavy armor all the way around, steam turbines so she was fast, rotating gun turrets, all revolutionary features for her day. She also started a naval arms race because all of a sudden everybody else was looking and they were like, dang man, England's got this badass warship. We're gonna need some of those, but ours needs to be bigger. So all around the world, everybody started building more and bigger battleships because that was seen as the key to national prominence on the world stage and military power. So the United States, not to be outdone, launched our first class of dreadnoughts. Example, BB-35, USS Texas. In true Texas style, she was not armed with 12-inch guns, she was armed with 14-inch guns. And to get those bigger guns, you gotta have a bigger hull, you gotta have bigger gun turrets, bigger barbettes, and bigger guns, which means bigger shells, which carry a lot more power whenever they hit their target. But today, we're gonna talk about America's first super dreadnought, BB-36, USS Nevada. USS Nevada, BB-36, was named for the 36th state of the Union, Nevada. Nevada was launched on July 11, 1914. She had 3 new features that would set the bar for all U.S. battleships going forward. She had 4 gun turrets with a total of 10 14-inch guns for her primary battery, oil fuel rather than coal, and the all-or-nothing armor scheme. But I would argue she had another type of armor, plot armor. You know what I'm talking about, that main character type energy, as we'll see later. She was 583 feet long, weighed 30,000 tons. She had 12 boilers that would help her reach a top speed of 20 knots, and she was crewed by 1,500 men. In 1930, she was modernized. So check out this picture here. You see how she had these old school World War I looking cage masts? Well, these got replaced with tripod masts for better command and control of her now improved main battery. Her main gun elevation was raised from 15 degrees to 30 degrees. This increased her range from 23,000 yards to 34,000 yards. That's almost 20 miles. This increased range would go on to save countless American lives on the battlefield. So in 1930, around the same time Nevada was undergoing her modernization, Imperial Japan began to aggressively expand in the Pacific in areas like Manchuria, the Philippines, that sort of thing. Japan doesn't have a lot of natural resources on their own, so they wanted to aggressively and brutally invade their neighbors to set up the empire that they would call the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, which, if I was going to name an empire or something, I'd probably name it something better than that, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, these guys engage in a particularly brutal conquest of the Pacific. And I mean, they do some awful things. They do one thing in Nanking, I can't even say the name of it, or Google won't even show you this video. They also take some 200,000 Chinese, Indonesian, and Korean women as comfort women for the Japanese army. And if I talk too much more about that, it's just gonna tick me off. I'm not gonna be able to finish this video. They also had what was called Unit 731. These guys did human experiments. They took organs out of people's bodies while they were still alive to see how long you could survive. They tested nerve gas, biological agents, more or less human experimentation and some truly brutal, awful things. Japan also understood that eventually they would run into a roadblock in the Pacific, and that roadblock was the United States. The biggest problem, the United States Navy. Where was most of the United States Navy? Pearl Harbor. Japan's thinking, we could do a quick, decisive strike at Pearl Harbor, crush the Americans' will to fight. Because see, Japan viewed America as a nation of, thugs, gangsters, bums, lazy, and once we looked at the newspaper and saw our beloved battleships named after states like Nevada, California, Oklahoma, in flames that would crush our will to fight, and we'd be willing to sign some kind of deal with the Japanese where, hey, y'all can do whatever y'all want to in the Pacific, we'll stay over here and we'll listen to our jazz music and do our own thing. So that was the plan. Decisive strike at Pearl Harbor, cripple the American fleet, crush the American will to fight. That being said, let's cut to a Saturday night in Hawaii. Here's a 20-year-old Clifford Olds, a sailor on the battleship USS West Virginia, having a drink with two of his shipmates in a bar. However, this was Saturday night, December 6th, 1941. The next day would change the course of history forever. Sunday, December 7th at 0600 at 6 a.m. On the USS Nevada, the assistant quartermaster of the watch wakes up 21-year-old Ensign Joseph Taussig. Joe Taussig is going to be the officer of the deck today. You see, the officer of the deck is basically where you have the authority to do captain stuff when the captain is doing other stuff. And this is a Sunday. They've been in port for 4 days now. So suffice to say, the captain and all the big shots are all going to be chilling on shore. So it's mostly going to be your lower ranking junior grade guys that are chilling on the battleship. So Joe Taussig knows it's going to be a slower day, and he's kind of just thinking of things to do, just to break up the boredom. So, like I said, Nevada has a total of 12 boilers. So when she's running to achieve her top speed, she definitely needs all 12 of these things at full power to turn those massive propellers underwater. So another thing, if you want to get a battleship underway, it takes several hours. All of the boilers have to be brought up to temperature, and then usually they'll guide that battleship out of the port by several tugboats. This process takes several hours. It's an incredibly painstaking and extremely precise process. So when a battleship's in port, they usually just keep like one boiler lit, right? So that boiler makes just enough power to keep the electricity on and keep the lights on, that sort of thing. So suffice to say, you definitely can't move a 30,000-ton battleship when she only has one boiler lit. That'd be like trying to drive your V8 car on one cylinder. So remember how I said Nevada has been running on one boiler for 4 days? So the plan? Well, we're going to bring that second boiler up to temperature and then shift the workload to that second boiler to ease the wear and tear on all the boilers evenly. That way you don't have one boiler that wears out a lot faster than the other ones. Now, I say all that to say this. Of the 8 battleships on Battleship Row on December 7th, Nevada is the only battleship with 2 boilers that are hot and ready to rock. Now here's one more unique thing about Nevada. So check out this map. So this is where you'll see a map of Battleship Row. The only 2 battleships that aren't tied to another battleship are California and Nevada. This will prove to be a big thing later on. So anyway, it's later in the morning, and the next thing that Joe Taussig has to worry about is morning colors. So morning colors is basically where all activity pauses for a moment on your base or ship or whatever, and you render honors to the American flag while they play the national anthem. So let me put it to you like this. When you're the officer of the deck running the show for morning colors, there might be some pretty important people that see if you screw up. Career-wise, you might find yourself
with a snorkel duct taped to their mouth and me shitting down that snorkel.
So that being said, our 21-year-old ensign is a little nervous. He even sends a guy to USS Arizona to verify which size American flag they're supposed to fly, because they've got all these different sizes of flags on the ship, right? At around 0800, a Japanese torpedo bomber roars overhead of the Nevada, and everybody's on the fantail of the ship rendering honors to the American flag. They got the doggone band out there, and most of the guys are confused. They're like, why is the Air Corps out here practicing on Sunday morning during colors? So the band actually keeps playing the national anthem because it never occurred to the bandmaster that you could stop playing the national anthem once you started, as he viewed that as being disrespectful. So this torpedo bomber's tail gunner fires a burst of about 30 machine gun rounds at the sailors and Marines assembled for morning colors on the Nevada. Luckily, he misses everybody on the ship, but he does shoot Nevada's flag full of bullet holes. Moments later, an aerial torpedo slams into the bow of the Nevada, somewhere near frame 40. To make sure y'all understand this, a torpedo is designed to break the back of a warship. So this is a huge explosive device that just slammed into the front of our battleship. Then, moments later, a Japanese bomber drops an armor-piercing bomb somewhere near turret 2 of USS Arizona. This bomb falls through the deck of Arizona. It lands in one of the ammunition magazines for her main guns, more or less where they store all the ammunition and gunpowder. Half a heartbeat later, Arizona explodes and kills 1,177 brave Marines and sailors. Matter of fact, about half the men killed during the Pearl Harbor attack were on USS Arizona. Now here's the thing. All the U.S. Navy sailors at Pearl Harbor are above all else fighting men, not some kind of unorganized mob. So immediately once the attack began, the Harbor Control Tower at Pearl Harbor issued an emergency order for all available ships to get underway. A few destroyers responded, as we'll see in a moment. However, on Battleship Row, Nevada has 2 boilers that are hot and has just enough power to get moving. Now going back to our car analogy, so you might not be able to get on the highway if your car is not turning at full power. However, you can definitely get out of a parking lot. So that being said, as Nevada's anti-aircraft guns come to life and manage to destroy the first Japanese airplane that day, her crew begin casting off lines, and then the bridge calls down to the engine room and tells them to begin bringing the rest of Nevada's massive power plant online. So here we go.
Engine room, bridge. Light off all 4 boilers. Make all preparations for getting underway. Report readiness status in 5 minutes.
Cut in all burners. Disengage jacking gear. Open guarding valve. Split the electric load.
So as Nevada begins to get underway and pass by the burning wreck of Arizona, Nevada's crew begins to rescue men out of the water that were blown off the deck of Arizona by the force of the blast. All the while, Nevada and the rest of the warships at Pearl Harbor are returning fire on the Japanese aircraft. Now, let's take a moment and talk about who the Japanese pilots are. These are mostly guys in their early 20s that have this like samurai warrior culture thing going on. Remember, these are guys that are told the Americans are a bunch of gangsters, bums, etc., that don't really want to fight, not even a worthy opponent. So when they go home after the raid, they want to be able to tell their family and friends that they dropped a bomb on a mighty battleship. Not like a cruiser, a fuel tank, or a repair yard, or something lame, So, ironically, World War II at sea would mostly be decided by aircraft carriers, not battleships. And a lot of the more modern heavy cruisers that were at Pearl Harbor that were fast enough to keep up with and protect the aircraft carrier strike groups were mostly untouched in favor of the going after the battleships. So these cruisers could also provide naval gunfire support to Marines as they took various islands in the Pacific, places like Peleliu, Tarawa, etc., places like that. Another thing to keep in mind is that this is combat. Things are moving violently and quickly. The warships are returning fire on the aircraft are trying to find targets. It's a highly stressful situation where quick decisions have to be made by everyone. So when Nevada begins to get underway, this just really pisses the Japanese pilots off, because how dare these American sailors try to raise their hand to the emperor, fight back, and possibly try to go to sea and locate the carrier strike group that they came from? Also, if they can sink this battleship in the middle of the harbor, they could create a massive battleship traffic jam that could potentially last for months in the harbor. So now you have aircraft that might otherwise have went after, say fuel tanks, the ship repair yards, the submarine base, things like that, And matter of fact, there was 4 modern heavy cruisers that were tied up together that were more or less untouched by bombs. The Japanese could have attacked this area and they could have done catastrophic damage to the U.S. fleet. So here's an interesting footnote. One of these modern cruisers at Pearl Harbor that were more or less untouched by bombs was the USS Phoenix. After the war, she would be sold to Argentina, where she would be renamed the General Belgrano. This ship would later be sunk by the English in the 1982 Falklands War. And matter of fact, she is the only ship to have been sunk by a nuclear-powered submarine, the HMS Conqueror. Anyway, the only two modern cruisers that were seriously damaged were the Raleigh and the Helena. Raleigh was hit by a stray torpedo, and Helena was attacked because she was moored next to a mine layer and potentially looked like a battleship from the air, and that's why they went after it. Again, the whole samurai bravado thing, right? Okay, back to the Pearl Harbor attack. So remember how the tower issued an emergency order for all available ships to get underway? So a few destroyers responded to that as well. Now, here's something that, Coach might not have taught you in high school history. Pearl Harbor was not just attacked by aircraft. Matter of fact, there were 5 Japanese miniature submarines that were supposed to attack Pearl Harbor as well in order to add to the confusion and maybe sink a couple of ships. However, only one of these managed to make it into the harbor. So around this time of the attack, one of these Japanese miniature submarines is noticed by the destroyer USS Monaghan.
Gepner is a submarine. She's obviously trying to sneak through the net into the harbor. General quarters.
Sound general quarters.
All engines ahead full. Aye, aye, sir.
So the Japanese miniature submarine turns and fires a torpedo at the Monaghan, but misses. So now USS Monaghan picks up speed and rams the miniature submarine, destroys it, and then drops a depth charge on it for good measure.
Shit. Got your ass.
Speaking of heroes making quick decisions under fire, let's talk about Doris Miller. So Doris Miller is a mess attendant, like a cook, on the battleship USS West Virginia. So anyway, during the attack, he notices an anti-aircraft gun on the deck was unmanned. So he immediately jumped into action despite having little training on this gun. And he managed to shoot down a Japanese aircraft. He was later awarded the Navy Cross, and I tell you what, they're gonna name a nuclear-powered Ford-class aircraft carrier after him. However, the battleship USS West Virginia would be hit by 9 torpedoes and several bombs. She would slowly sink into the mud of the harbor. Salvage and rescue crews worked as fast as they could after the attack to rescue trapped sailors. However, accessing deep areas of a heavily armored battleship that's partially underwater can be an incredible undertaking. Months later, after salvage crews were able to cut through the hull of USS West Virginia, they found the body of 20-year-old Clifford Olds and 2 of his shipmates in a flooded pump room. They also found markings on the wall, indicating that these sailors survived for 16 days, trapped. Family members who learned this never told their parents to prevent their parents from suffering any further. So around this time, we're in the second wave of the attack. Bear in mind, this is around 40 minutes into the attack, around 0840, and the American anti-aircraft fire is becoming more effective. So the stress and chaos is higher on everyone. So meanwhile, everybody's noticing this massive battleship, USS Nevada, getting underway. Sailors from nearby warships cheered, hollered, and waved their caps, and even other warships blow their horn to further cheer on the Nevada as she makes her way out of the channel. One sailor even remarked after seeing the bullet-torn flag on the Nevada that it kind of reminded him of when Francis Scott Key wrote the Star-Spangled Banner. So, while Nevada is getting underway, about 15 aircraft go after her, and she's hit by another 5 bombs. One of these bombs lands near the starboard anti-aircraft director, and the force from the blast blows the left leg off of 21-year-old Ensign Joseph Taussig. So Nevada's already been hit by a torpedo, 5 bombs, and she's on fire, but she's still slowly moving through the channel. The admiral calls Nevada and signals the crew to try to run her aground on Hospital Point to prevent her from sinking and blocking the channel. During this entire ordeal, Nevada's crew was never ordered to abandon ship. Newspapers would later publish the story of the Nevada getting underway, which would further inspire a nation to fight back. So, of the 8 battleships that were present at Pearl Harbor, only 2 of them were not able to be repaired and later serve in World War II. These 2 were the Arizona and the Oklahoma. That being said, Nevada was repaired and refloated in 1942. She spent the better part of 1943 protecting cargo ships going from the US to England. So, in 1944, it was time to invade France and begin to liberate Europe from the Nazis. Here's the thing, the Nazis know this is coming. They've had years to build bunkers, machine gun nests, minefields, coordinate interlocking fields of fire, zero in artillery guns. In other words, they turned the coast of France into like a fortress. These guys know the Allies are coming and they're ready to fight about it. Now, I want you to picture yourself as an American GI on the morning of June 6th, 1944, as you're stepping into your Higgins boat to invade the coast of France. And all you have is this? It might make a pretty doggone big difference if you can do this.
Target reference, Dog 1, south 700, elevation 050.
Nevada was able to destroy several German seawalls and heavily reinforced casemate batteries. Her massive firepower also helped repel several German counterattacks and save the lives of many Americans in the 4th Infantry Division, including my grandfather. So think about this. If you're a paratrooper several miles inland and you're trying to hold a crossroads or something, it makes a pretty big difference if you can pick up the radio and call the battleships offshore to give you some highly accurate artillery fire whenever you need it in order to keep the Nazis off your back.
2 reinforced rifle companies. Tell those Joes to get the lead off. 100 short, 50 right, and fire for effect. You're out on the nose. Keep it coming.
Nevada would later go on to participate in Operation Dragoon, which was the invasion of southern France a few months later. She would even get into a gunfight with a massive German fortress known only as Big Willie. Nevada fired so many rounds through her 14-inch guns that she actually wore out her gun barrels. She went back to New York and had her gun barrels replaced with those salvaged from the USS Arizona, allowing Arizona to continue fighting from beyond the grave. Nevada would sail to the Pacific in 1945 to provide naval gunfire support to the Marines taking Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Now, we mentioned earlier the Japanese have like a major samurai warrior culture thing going on, right? These guys refused to be taken alive, and most of the time they were willing to fight to the death. These islands are considered almost sacred ground to the Japanese soldiers, and they were not willing to let them go without a fight. The Marines definitely needed all the naval gunfire and artillery support they could get. During the battle off the coast of Okinawa, Nevada was struck by a Japanese kamikaze aircraft near her No. 3 gun turret, which killed 49 brave sailors on USS Nevada. At the end of World War II, Nevada would go on to serve as part of the occupation force in Tokyo Bay, just sitting there as a 30,000-ton reminder of what would happen in case the Japanese decided to get a little froggy.
You know I'm working up that plan B, brother. Draw the gun.
Now here's the thing. Nevada was launched in 1914, and she was already considered to be an old battleship during World War II. The Navy really didn't have much of a use for her anymore. And sure, some battleships were turned into museums, that sort of thing, but Nevada would have a very different fate. You see, America had a brand new superweapon, the atomic bomb, and we really didn't understand it all that well. For example, what would happen if you dropped an atomic bomb on a bunch of warships? I don't know, but we were damn sure gonna go find out. Enter Operation Crossroads, July 1946. Location, the Bikini Islands. Purpose, to study the effect of atomic bombs on warships. Fun fact, around the same time, a French fashion designer was inventing a new two-piece swimsuit for women. He named it the Bikini, after the United States atomic tests during that era. Because this new two-piece swimsuit would blow you away, right? Like the atomic bomb.
June and Dorothy play a game of Scrabble to while away a swimless afternoon.
So, they painted the Nevada bright orange to basically be a bullseye for the atomic bomb and parked her right in the middle of some target warships. So, Shot Able was dropped on July 1st, 1946. This was an airburst bomb, and it sunk 5 warships and damaged Nevada, but did not sink her. So on July 25th, Test Baker commenced. This was an underwater atomic bomb, detonated about 90 feet underwater. It sunk 10 warships, including a captured Nazi heavy cruiser, but Nevada was not one of these 10 warships. So, the Navy did some studies on Nevada and concluded that she was highly radioactive. In July 1948, they towed her out to the middle of the ocean and basically used her as a target for naval gunfire. They even brought out the battleship USS Iowa with her 16-inch guns, and they fired shells at USS Nevada trying to sink her. However, Nevada still refused to sink. It wasn't until she had one final hit from an aerial torpedo that she succumbed to her wounds and sank into the Pacific Ocean. Her wreck was discovered in 2020. Ensign Joseph Taussig survived the attack on Pearl Harbor, but he did lose his left leg. He was awarded the Navy Cross. Chief Machinist Mate Donald Ross, he was the man who made sure that Nevada had enough power in the engine room during the Pearl Harbor run. He was awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions that day. The Emperor of Japan would continue serving even after World War II. He would go on to visit Disneyland in 1975. So tonight, let's raise a glass to the brave men of the USS Nevada, because truly the greatest casualty is being forgotten. Thanks for watching.